Certainly a most extraordinary affair is this Battle of Gettysburg, whether judged by itself as a piece of realistic painting or by the result which it unmistakably attains. There's something weird and eerie about the thing, something that is suggestive more of another world. The laws of perspective are all bewitched, and everything is uncanny. It is impossible to accept the thing as a painting. Boston Daily Transcript, December 30th, 1884.
"120 years later, the effort is underway to recapture the experience of viewers of the cyclorama in the 1880s. Like the painting itself, the work is on a massive scale, calling for artists from as far away as Eastern Europe, millions of dollars, and more than 4 years of painstaking restoration. Among the challenges is the fact that the painting has not been seen by anyone alive the way it was intended, as an optical illusion, immersing the viewer into a moment in time, the high watermark of Pickett's charge on July 3, 1863. In addition, the painting is badly damaged. Large pieces of it are missing or altered, and a key element, the sky on July 3rd, has been cut away. No one can say what it is supposed to look like. To restore the painting to its original appearance, modern artists and conservators will need to be detectives and engineers, all in a do-or-die effort to save a 12-decade-old piece of art, larger than a football field. Paul Philippoteaux's mammoth work, The Battle of Gettysburg. July 1913. It is the 50th anniversary of the epic Battle of Gettysburg. Veterans returned to the fields of their youth in one of the last great reunion encampments of the American Civil War. The youngest veteran is 63. The oldest claims to be 112. On July 3rd, veterans of George Pickett's Virginia Division stage a reenactment of their famous charge, ending in handshakes with Union survivors at a stone wall on Cemetery Ridge. Not far away, a work of art depicting that pivotal moment of the war has been newly reopened to the public. It is a panoramic painting, an art form which began 100 years earlier and reached its height of popularity toward the end of the 19th century. Despite its massive size, the painting is almost an afterthought. It does not have all of the sky, nor its three-dimensional foreground. Large sections of it have simply vanished or been damaged beyond repair. The work is also missing one of the elements which define it as a panorama. Rather than take the graceful curve of its original form, it hangs flat against the walls of the huge round building. Visitors are impressed with the painting's size and the detail of the action. But few of them realize they are looking at a distortion and missing out on the experience which the artist intended. A full immersion into the moment, as if, for that moment, you are actually there. July 2008. For nearly a century, the cyclorama Battle of Gettysburg has been shown to the public as a flat, two-dimensional piece of art. Now the effort is underway to change all that. A team of art conservators, historians, and volunteers have undertaken the enormous task of restoring the painting. The enterprise is ambitious in the extreme. Led by conservator David Olin, they are faced with daunting challenges, and even some obstacles posed by past, well-meaning restoration efforts. In 9 decades of incorrect public display, the painting has deteriorated badly. Original paint is peeling, cracking, and falling away. Portions of the work have been overpainted, and content in some cases has been altered in order to hide problems caused by poor handling and storage. The 1950s restoration used wax and glue in order to make the painting hang straight. That mixture was slowly eating away at the canvas and must be removed. Fire, water, and the elements have all contributed to a general deterioration, to the point that no one can remember how it once looked when it first opened to the public in Boston in 1884. Fortunately, the way the painting is supposed to be viewed is well known. But it involves more than a flair for the paintbrush, or the skill to restore the cracked paint of the artist to its original brilliance. It demands the ability to organize and manage a team of artists, to engineer the movement of 4 tons of repaired canvas, and it calls for an understanding of some geometry as well. In an era before IMAX, before movies transported the viewer into a different time and place, people in the 1800s were viewing a new art form which seemed to reach out and draw them into the canvas. Today we call these paintings cycloramas, from their round or cylinder shape, but they are really panoramas, from the Greek words pan, meaning all, and horama, or view. The goal of these paintings was to help viewers suspend their disbelief and place them at the center of the action. There are 4 major components of this illusion. First is the painting itself, employing a canvas nearly 50 feet tall. Next, the artist uses a foreground, which looks like real ground, littered with 3-dimensional objects, which blends with the bottom of the painting. Then there is the sky, a canopy of linen hanging over the viewer and masking the top edge of the painting. And finally, there is the painting's shape, a perfect circle which surrounds the viewer at every turn, with different views of the same event, one moment in time. With nothing to keep the viewer in the here and now, all that's needed is a little desire to be instantly transported, and the illusion takes hold. You are there. The illusion and the perspective are affected by something the artist cannot prevent. Cyclorama paintings were not meant to be mounted. Instead, they were hung from a rail that ran around the top of the inside of the huge round building. Another rail or pipe was fastened to the bottom edge, with weights attached in order to stretch the canvas. This resulted in something not faced in ordinary canvas painting. The weighted canvas would not fall straight, but bowed inward on its own, by as much as 18 inches. We call this shape a hyperbola, from another Greek word meaning excess.
Faites de votre mieux, nous ne pouvons pas empêcher cela. Cet accident est utile à certains égards pour entretenir l'illusion, et là où elle est défectueuse, la rentrée surmonte la faute. Paul Philippoteaux.
The line of horizon is the most important line, the most important thing to recreate the perspective and illusion in this kind of art. Because all the perspective lines come to this line. So visitors who are standing on the viewing platform, the average visitor should has this line on the level of his or her eye.
People just love to go down to the bottom of the painting, look straight up and say, whoa, it's enormous. But you don't do that. You view the painting from the middle. You don't go down to the bottom down there. But they've accepted for what it was at that time. This time now they're going back and they want it back into the 1883. They want the illusion back. They're going back for the illusion. And the illusion couldn't occur unless you had the width and the height and you had to have the diorama.
Using the foreground terrain, the sky, the circular canvas, and the hyperbola, an artist could thrust the viewer into any landscape, any event that he cared to paint. The only question was, what subject would people pay to see?
At Gettysburg, this tremendous, impactful event happened, and this is the real place. Nothing's recreated. This is the real place where it all happened.
And it's an extremely important part of the history for America. And this painting really does depict the landscape, which also makes it extremely fascinating in the stories. It's a valuable piece of the Americana, and it's here in Gettysburg where it belongs.
In July of 1863, the American Civil War is in its 3rd summer. After high hopes on both sides for a quick victory, the war has settled down into a series of brutal and bloody battles that prove indecisive, raising the cost while prolonging the agony. But that summer, the war and the Union seemed to hang in the balance. Confederate General Robert E. Lee has won another battle over the Federals at a crossroads called Chancellorsville, near Fredericksburg, Virginia. Determined to make something of his victory, Lee takes his army of northern Virginia north, bringing the war into enemy territory. To protect Washington and come to grips with the Confederates, the Union Army of the Potomac follows, and the two sides collide at an important road junction called Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. For 2 days, they fight to a bloody stalemate. On the third day, Lee decides to wager all on one last grand assault, a coordinated attack of infantry and cavalry, preceded by a massive bombardment of artillery on the center of the Union line. The main thrust will come from a newly arrived division of Virginians under George Pickett. Supporting him are the small divisions of Pettigrew and Trimble, which sustained heavy casualties on the first day. If Lee's plan works, he will break the Union position on Cemetery Ridge, open the road to Baltimore and Washington, and victory for the Confederacy. May 2004.
The very initial step was a surface cleaning of the painting, not a deep cleaning, but just a superficial cleaning. That alone showed a remarkable improvement in the painting, because if you ever walk into the old gallery and you see the canopy over the viewing platform, it's covered with a dark soot. Well, that same soot was on the painting. So it appeared dull in a lot of colored photographs, but now it is brilliant. The colors are beautiful. From that point, the painting was taken down in sections and laid flat on the ground. Then a more intensive cleaning was done.
We run into complications constantly. The cleaning didn't go the way we thought. We did an enormous number of tests. We had it all analyzed, cross-sections, etc. But when you got to the painting, one spot was different than the next. We had to develop a new technique to remove the grime, dirt, and accretions and overpaint. It had been terribly overpainted by previous restorers, so that passages were changed, colors were changed, and we have to very carefully remove all that to expose what the artist had.
Then things got tedious after that. They had to remove a backing that the former conservator placed on it, which was adhered with a thick waxy glue. Well, that was damaging the painting. So that had to be removed with a solvent and a sawdust poultice that was placed on there to cause the backing to lift away from the original painting. That had to be taken off in strips of about 2 inches each. Every foot had to be removed on the back of this enormous painting. Once that was removed, there was a glue residue left behind. That glue residue had to be taken off because it made the threads stiff, and also not willing to accept new solvents or new adhesives. That had to be scraped off with a scalpel, with a light scraping in keeping with the lines of the threads. Again, 1 inch at a time with a scalpel on your knees, face down on the painting.
The conservation of the cycloramas, it's a very new part of the science, because the conservation, it is part of science, and also the art, of course, but mostly the science.
Then old patches had to be removed because they got somewhat stiff, and if you don't take them off and it's loose around the edges of it, it could fall out. Once they were taken out, you have a pretty ugly looking canvas left, because you've got all the former conservative paint off, you have all these holes showing in it, so it looked pretty bad.
Adding to the challenge is the fact that nearly 40% of the painting is missing. When the painting was partially restored in the 1950s, it had already been decided to eliminate the illusion. No accommodation was made for the foreground terrain. The new building would accommodate only the action on the painting and a small portion of the painted sky. That presented a dilemma for the restoration effort in the new century. What did that sky look like? Was it overcast or sunny, or somewhere in between? No one knew. And there were other problems.
Right here is the little boy with the 2 buckets. It's cut right here. You just can't see the seam one in this photo, but it's cut right here, okay? When we went into here, we noticed that there was additional repaint from past campaigns, so we started removing some of this paint in this area. What we exposed on this part of the seam was a little end of the stretcher, like this, over here. So meaning that we knew from an earlier photograph here that he doesn't really hold these buckets. He's holding a stretcher with another figure. So we know in here, to get another person in here and in the stretcher, we need about 3 feet in there to make the scale work. And this is the angle, the wall, the important angle. We're supposed to come down like this, and it comes together like this, the angle. All right, so basically when it comes off the painting, this wall and this wall have to make a 90 degree, and that will be part of the diorama. It didn't do this.
Yeah, oh, look at that.
See, all this is all restoration, so this will make more, when we get done, it'll make more sense, because the angle, again, is an important part of the battle. They always talk about that.
The focus of the Confederate assault is a low ridge rising up from a roadbed, one of 10 roads which meet in Gettysburg. Union forces have not dug in here, instead relying on the low stone walls which mark off Abraham Bryant's farm fields. One wall runs south, but then takes a sharp angle, running west toward the Confederates, and then angles south again.
The only reason the angle's famous is because during the attack on the third day, it was a vulnerable spot in the Union line. Any 90-degree angle, an attacking force can bring fire from 2 directions against it. It's very difficult to defend it.
Aiding in the effort to break the Union center are attacks on the Union right at Culp's Hill and a cavalry assault working its way around from the north. But the Culp's Hill assault started early and was beaten back. As Pickett began his charge, the cavalry attack was being checked east of Gettysburg. In spite of the odds, Pickett, Pettigrew, and Trimble will go in alone with only the artillery to support them. At 1 o'clock, the big guns open fire. April 1882. Cyclorama artist Paul Philippoteaux has come to America to learn all he can about the Battle of Gettysburg.
He did his homework. He spoke to veterans, participants, officers. He came to the battlefield. He took tours of the battlefield with a veteran.
Settling on the action of the third day, Pickett's charge, he employs a local photographer to take a series of landscapes from a carefully chosen point. To create the illusion, Philippoteaux must establish the proper perspective. Too low, and the figures in the foreground will obscure the action. Too high, and the artist will be painting the tops of heads, minimizing the human drama of the event. But a short 20-foot vantage point will carry the viewer just above the fray to allow great distances or background action to be included while being low enough to include the faces of the participants.
All right, I have the first image.
So a 20-foot tower is erected, and Gettysburg photographer William Tipton takes a series of 10 landscapes, with the bottom of each frame 40 feet from the bottom of the tower, which is also the distance between the viewing platform and the bottom of the painting.
We talk about Philippoteaux all the time because in a way he's a presence among us. We know that he had a team of about 16 painters, and they tend to have their specialties in the zones. Like one really accomplished painter would paint the area just at the horizon, and another painter might be more expert at doing the large figures, and one painter was really good at doing the horses. And you get so that you recognize some of the faces around the canvas, like you'd be cleaning a face and suddenly realize this looks kind of like this guy on the other, over there. So you get to recognize the styles of the people he had working for him. And we wonder about the kind of taskmaster that Philippoteaux must have been to create this very large painting in the time that he did it.
Yeah, we'll stop there, and I guess we'll start.
Summer 2005.
Work our way over in front of the.
Overseeing the project, now in its second year, is David Olin.
Right here, this one's the first one.
Like the artist Philippoteaux, Olin apprenticed with his father and is now vice president of Olin Conservation.
He's right there with us. I mean, we are there scraping the back of a canvas to take off glue residue with a scalpel, 1 square inch at a time. You want grunt labor, there it is. And David was right there with us.
For the monumental task of restoring a 400-foot painting, David Olin has called in professionals from earlier projects and a team of specialists from Poland, men and women who have an intimate understanding of panoramas and how they are supposed to immerse the viewer.
We have the same attitude, we have the same respect for this masterpiece. We try to don't destroy any small piece of this painting.
Not many people have ever worked on a cyclorama here in the United States, you know, and so half the people don't even know what a cyclorama is. And so basically with Richard, who had restored 2 in Europe, you would go after somebody that has done these before, has a sense of cycloramas, has already gone through so many things, and could he come here and augment his skills on this one? One couldn't do it without the other one.
They are assembled for each of their unique individual specialties, but you can go into that studio or gallery anytime and see them all cross-working on the project. They're all stitching, they're all scraping, they're all doing the menial tasks, they're all doing the really focused, intensive tasks that require a lot of education or talent.
If they have long experience from other projects to bring to it, then that's so much the better for this, because they're your eyes and hands, an extension of your thoughts and concepts, and they change, of course, throughout the project, and that comes from the team.
When we saw it here and stood there in that area, we were looking at a painting hanging straight on a wall 40 feet away. Now when you will see it, it curved with the lower portion, with the enlarged soldiers. They're marching really to you, and they're coming close to you.
July 3rd, 1863, 3 p.m. As Bruce Catton wrote about it nearly 100 years later, the thing could not be done. But some 12,000 Confederate soldiers from Virginia, Mississippi, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Alabama were determined to try. Arrayed in 3 parallel lines that stretched for more than a mile, they started off across the farm fields of William Bliss, straight at the Union line nearly a mile away. Waiting for them were most of the Union Second Corps, 7,000 men backed by artillery with units from other divisions close at hand. The artillery bombardment, which the Confederates had relied on to drive out the Federals, had largely overshot its mark, and the Union infantry remained, waiting for the rebels to get close. But well before they were in rifle range, the attacking lines would come under the guns of Union artillery, firing shell and shrapnel at long range, and deadly canister when they got close. When Union infantry opened fire, the carnage was almost indescribable.
Our line, much shattered, still kept up the advance until within 20 paces of the wall, when for a moment it recoiled under the terrific fire that poured from the ranks of both the batteries and the sheltered infantry. The fighting of the wall became hand-to-hand and of the most desperate character. Major Charles Peyton, 19th Virginia, Pickett's division.
Philippoteaux obviously knew what soldiers in battle looked like. His soldiers look very, very natural. Everyone looks natural. They look like you would imagine soldiers would. They look like soldiers under fire that you've seen in newsreels from World War II or Vietnam or Korea or Iraq. They look like men under fire.
Summer 1882. Returning to Paris, Paul Philippoteaux begins the actual artwork. The Tipton landscapes provide nearly all he needs to know about the terrain, foliage, fence lines, and stone walls. He joins the 10 photographs in a panorama and marks them off with grid lines, which will guide the team of artists in their work. For detail of the action, from entire regiments to the faces of individual soldiers, Philippoteaux has prepared pen and ink drawings, each one corresponding to a square in the grid. He projects the drawings onto the canvas using an optical device that had been delighting and frightening audiences since the Renaissance, the magic lantern. A bright light is focused through a lens and projected onto a light opaque surface, like a canvas. When a slide is inserted between the light and lens, it is cast upon the surface as well. And thus Philippoteaux is able to control what his artists draw and then paint onto the massive canvas.
But those lines exist under the paint. And one of the things the conservators have done is taken an infrared camera and found them on the painting. And that's how they know how many feet of painting is missing. This is how they're going to recreate some very detailed missing elements because they see the grid lines.
Part of our job is very artistical. Second part is our knowledge, our professional way of thinking, because we need to know the technique of the old masters. We need to know how he created this illusion.
Summer 2006. The long, slow, painstaking process of patching the painting is well underway. The work is so precise that surgical instruments and thread are used to join the patches with the original canvas.
Certain pieces of the sky were found with this rolled up painting in Boston in 1910 that was used to add to the bottom of the painting for this reason. It's always intended to have a diorama. So you would have, let's for example say, a stone well. Well, only the back half of the well is in the painting. The front half is to be completed with three-dimensional stone. But now there was no diorama, so you have to complete these pieces, these elements in the bottom margin of the painting. That was done by taking those pieces of sky, attaching them to the bottom, and overpainting them. So that was removed as part of this conservation. So here we have scrap pieces that we're going to use for patches. Now we have the proper weight, proper thread count, proper age. Everything works. It's the perfect patch.
All day, like that, yeah, just like that. And one person can sit kind of like with one knee up in the air and one to the side. I can't, you know, there's all these different poses. So everybody's got a different position. And then sometimes they squirm all day long.
You look at things as an object and you want to get your hands on it to try to do this or that to it. And that is really very satisfying about a project where you see something and it's a really neat object and you know you could really make it look a little bit better, and you have the opportunity to put your hands right on it and start to do that.
This 2-foot piece was totally detached. And my job is to fill the seam, and on some of these it's a little difficult. But as long as we can provide a smooth surface, when the artists come in to fill all the areas where the cracks have been, that's my goal.
Every little place is a vignette, and it tells a story, it tells something about what was going on, it ties it all together so that you get a feeling of being at this moment.
We were here right behind that wall. It was packed, hundreds of Confederates behind the wall. And it was from that point the Confederates had seized this lodgment in the Union line that they then tried to enlarge the lodgment by penetrating. So that's what Lewis Armistead, this general in Pickett's division, he leads as many men who will follow him. They come over the wall. I'm sure what Armistead was intending to do was to outflank the Union defenders who were to the south of us. The only way to do this is to penetrate into the Union position. So he leads these men over the wall into the angle. This was the moment where the battle trembled in the balance.
Yet a small remnant remained in desperate struggle, receiving fire in front and on the right and on the left, many climbing over the wall and fighting the enemy until entirely surrounded, the identity of every regiment being entirely lost, and every regimental commander killed or wounded. Major Charles Peyton.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. In July of 1863, I had the honor to serve with the 20th Massachusetts.
Philippoteaux's Battle of Gettysburg opened in New York and was so successful that a second one was commissioned, which opened in Boston in 1884.
On July 3rd, the 20th, along with the rest of the second car, was posted along this ridge in front of you.
There's stories that the veterans became at first almost afraid because initially when you went onto the platform, you got a sense of immersion in this three-dimensional view, and it took them back. And then once they recovered from that initial shock, they talked about the realism and how Only a veteran who had been there could understand how good it was, how accurate, and how visually perfect it was.
As the great Napoleon once said, in war, men are nothing. A man is everything.
I take great pleasure in giving my testimony in regard to this picture of the defenses of the clump of trees, or Pickett's charge at Gettysburg, July 3rd, 1863. It is as near perfection as possible. General Alexander Webb.
With a moderation worthy of great praise, the artist has created a work that is truly valuable, not only as a means of amusement, but as a most instructive lesson with regard to the great battle. Boston Daily Transcript.
Summer 2007. The restoration is now well into its 4th year, already taking 3 times as long as the original painting. Cleaned and patched panels are now ready for transport to the new Visitors Center, a huge 140,000 square foot building sited where none of the combat actually took place.
Did you invent this system?
Invent? I think the Egyptians invented the cylinder or something. Okay, it's yours. The system of putting paintings on tubes is a standard in the field. That's how you move and turn them and so on and so forth. Yeah, slow and easy. We want to unroll it that way, so that end goes in last, right? The different ways of hoisting and rigging things are particular to the current application. So yes, we did invent that particular mechanism for rigging, and then the dollies that we're using.
So much more of the project has to do with actual engineering.
I think we want to bring your side in first.
How to remove the panels, how to get them down, how to transport them.
Let's unroll it. Let's see where we get to, because I really don't want it rolled up too long.
And all of that is a totally different kind of work than most paintings conservators have to address.
The center of the painting's new home is the Cyclorama Gallery. Worked into the plans for the building is the inclusion of the sky, an additional 14 vertical feet of canvas beyond the old Cyclorama Gallery. Through a bit of luck and detective work, the project team now knows what that huge missing piece actually looked like.
When you have something of this magnitude, you create an oil painting that will pretty much have the elements in it that you intend to use to see what the overall effect of it will be. We know he did that because we've seen that. That oil painting is in the Chicago History Museum. While there, as we're looking through the card catalog, we came upon a card that said Philippoteaux, so we looked, and it described these rather large paintings. And initially we thought, wonder what they are. So we asked to see them, and we were absolutely ecstatic. They had been agonizing over, was the sky cloudy that day because it was going to storm that night? Was it a little bit hazy because a huge cannonade had just occurred on the battlefield? But someone had recalled reading that Philippoteaux said it was a clear, crisp sky. Well, it is. It's a brilliant blue sky with a few white fluffy clouds in it. I could have flown home from Chicago without my airplane.
With the discovery of Philippoteaux's scaled painting, the mystery of the sky and other missing pieces is solved. Work proceeds on transporting, hanging, and weighting the panels in preparation for the unveiling to the public in 2008. By 4 p.m., Pickett, Pettigrew, and Trimble's grand assault is over. Casualties are enormous. Pickett writes that they accomplished nothing and sacrificed their finest men. For the Federals, there is the unmistakable sense that they have taken the best that the Confederates can throw at them and held. The war will go on for 2 more long and bloody years. But for the veterans who survived, this is the day they would remember when the Union was saved. And for the Confederates, it is their high water mark. The belief that it almost worked, and the beginning of the lost cause. The Battle of Gettysburg Cyclorama enjoyed more than a decade of popular success. It was painted during the height of the cyclorama craze, when gigantic panorama paintings were being created and exhibited all over the world. Cyclorama companies exchanged paintings. The Boston building traded Gettysburg for a cyclorama depicting the crucifixion. 2 more replicas of the painting were created, and at least 2 others were done, what we would call knockoffs, bringing the total number of Gettysburg cycloramas to 6. And then, just at the height of its popularity, the cyclorama craze was over, done in by something no bigger than a postage stamp. Motion pictures had begun, and while the movies couldn't make you feel like part of the scene, they could do something a painting could not: move. Attendance for all cycloramas fell off. The buildings were torn down or converted to other uses, and the giant paintings were rolled up, put into storage crates, and practically forgotten. Enter Albert J. Hayne, a wealthy department store owner from Newark, New Jersey. Early in the new century, Hayne bought the Boston version of Gettysburg and displayed some of the panels in his store. Other panels were displayed at a National Guard armory in Brooklyn, where LaSalle Pickett came to speak in front of the painting depicting her husband's famous charge. But the painting had been badly handled. In Boston, it had been stored under a lean-to and exposed to fire, rain, and the temperature extremes of winter and summer. Hayne had the painting cut into pieces to better fit the dimensions of his store lobby. And thus began the slow deterioration that resulted in the missing sky, damaged canvas, altered vignettes, and a smaller circumference than the original 377 feet. When it was donated to Gettysburg in time for the 50th anniversary, it had not been properly displayed for nearly 2 decades. That situation would continue for another 90 years. Spring 2008. All of the painting's giant panels have been hung and weighted. True to form, and for the first time since 1892, the canvas has taken its proper hyperbolic shape. Ironically, the conservation team is performing their restoration in such a way that it can be undone.
Everything should be reversible. And I hope that these conservators who will come in next 50 years, they will say that these materials, these methods which we use, they are reversible, which is the main rule of the conservation.
With the canvas hanging correctly, conservators can finally apply new paint to old canvas, touching up areas that have been damaged and filling in details that have long been missing. The missing sky is given its full treatment. The 3-dimensional foreground, or faux terrain, is again added to the presentation, and the sky canopy is hung above the viewing platform. The top and bottom edges of the painting disappear, and the illusion, the original intent of the artist, reemerges for a new generation of visitors. History buffs are quick to point out that the painting has its share of inaccuracies, some of which are probably intentional. The most obvious mistake is the death of Louis Armistead, who was mounted on a horse and falling, leading his men over the wall. Armistead was not mounted during the charge, and subsequent versions of the painting corrected this error. The same mistake was made in mounting Alexander Webb and Norman Hall. Haystacks have a definite Old World look, and it's debated whether recent immigrants would have stored their hay in this manner in America. Wounded men are seen being mounted in a cassolet, a French army invention for removing wounded on horseback, not a practice used in the Civil War. Canteens and other accoutrements are sometimes placed over the wrong shoulder. Some buildings have pronounced European architecture, and where Philippoteaux needed detail, he fell back on what he knew, with buildings and flowers that are more characteristic of France and Holland than Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. But the greatest error of all was entirely intentional and done to enhance the viewer's experience. To tell a greater part of the story of Pickett's charge, Philippoteaux compressed time, drawing events that occurred over nearly 3 hours into a single moment in time. In doing so, he created an allegory. Allegorical paintings have been around since the Renaissance. One of the best known is Benjamin West's The Death of Wolfe, which compressed events, time, and people into a single moment, even people who weren't there. The viewer would thus have a greater appreciation for everything that led to that moment, the capture of Quebec and the death of James Wolfe. Like West, Philippoteaux ignored time as an absolute and conveyed something more than a literal interpretation of Pickett's charge.
So you see Lieutenant Alonzo Cushing turning to give a final command before he's killed. Well, he was already dead by the time what you see in the painting occurred. You see General Meade in the painting because he wanted you to see Meade, and he wanted to identify Meade in the painting. But Meade wasn't he was at Powers Hill making his way over in this direction and didn't arrive on Cemetery Ridge until the attack was repulsed. And in the painting, when you look at it, out here along Seminary Ridge, the tree line a mile away from us, you'll see smoke rising out here along the ridge from Confederate artillery. Now, at the moment in time that the artist captures, when the Confederates' infantry goes over the Union works, there's no Confederate artillery firing out there at the Union lines. Also in the painting, down near the clump of trees, we see a limber chest that's exploding. It's kind of a central moment in the foreground of the painting. That event occurred during the bombardment. So he's trying to combine some of these different events into this one moment.
Philippoteaux also included people whom he knew were nowhere near the scene of his painting. The most striking example is Lincoln, being carried away from a field hospital, the only character Philippoteaux painted who was unmistakably dead, a tribute to the martyred president. Another misplaced character is the artist himself, painted into the action as a Union officer watching the battle, which was Philippoteaux's way of signing his massive work.
When you view the painting, it doesn't seem static. It captures all this energy and motion. So you see the Union response, the defenders sweeping up against the Confederate attackers, and you see the Confederates desperately trying to fight off the Union forces that are building up against them and widen the breach they've created. But you see it. It comes to life in the painting.
They look like they are moving. You're away from them a while, they're moving slow, you expect that. The illusion is designed when the artist conceives this for these kind of things to work towards the illusion. There's a lot of deception involved in it, and they were masters and skilled at it.
Did you ever think you'd be this close to the painting?
Never. The years coming up here and seeing it, never.
We walk outside and we're in the same place where the events of this battle took place, and here we are surrounded by the scenes of this battle all day long.
This is 125 years old, this painting, and we still can go back to it, and it can do things for us today that with all of our technology we can't duplicate, we can't capture.
It all goes back to the veterans, it all goes back to the story. It all goes back to July of 1863. Face it, we're all who we are today because of what happened here in July. So it's bigger than all of us.
I'm very proud of our cyclorama because it looks very good now, even after almost 25 years after conservation. It's like a new painting. This cyclorama is treasure.
Here are our visual records of humanity developing. And our little job is really to see that that is cared for and passed on to the succeeding generations in as good a condition as we received it. And that's our charge, and that's our vision.